All right. Welcome, Legal Roadmap podcast listeners. I have a special guest with me today. Erica Corday is joining me. We met a couple months ago when we were both speakers at the Being Boss conference. I was looking forward to meeting her personally and hugging her neck in New Orleans, but that did not happen. So we did the virtual conference, which was still really fun, and we got to connect a little bit, and then we had just to get to know you call after that, and since everything that has happened, we're recording this on Monday, June 8th. I will kind of set that in the sand. We're planning on releasing it next Monday, so just in a week. If you're listening to this later, there has been a lot of racism in the news, police violence in the news. It is not anything new. It is just in the news more. And so I invited Erica on because, especially in the online community where we both work, there's been a lot of conversation about this, and Erica works in this field, is an expert in this, and I was really interested to hear her voice and just have a conversation about all these things that have been happening. So Erica, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Autumn. And I'm going to agree. Yes, I was really looking forward to a lot of hugs, and
Yeah.
damn, Corona came in and put a halt to all of those things. But it was
and
still
all the
really good.
in-person cocktails, which I was also looking forward
And
to.
see, that's the thing. I'm like, can we just sit for a minute and talk? And yeah, some drinks in there is always helpful. So yes, however, I was glad that at least it did still continue, because I did get an opportunity to still be able to meet you. And I think that um, it's an important conversation that you invited me on to have. And so for that, I appreciate you being able to bring this to your listeners and allow me to bring my voice and my particular lens on this. So for that, thank you.
Yeah. Will you start off, anybody who doesn't know you and isn't familiar with your work, and give us just a little bit of background, maybe what you've done in the past, what you're doing these days, a little bit about your business?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Erica Corday. I am a coaching consultant, and the lens that I do my work through is DEI. And a lot of what I do really started and stemmed from, well, I went way back. It's a lot of life things. So from a generational standpoint, there were a lot of pieces that were kind of passed down. But from a work standpoint, I have a hair and makeup company, a beauty brand called Silver Immersion. And when I really stepped into showcasing the beliefs, ethics, and values of it front facing, and really not just doing it, but owning it and talking about it and making it very clear that this was what we stood for. And if you were not okay with that, then we just really didn't want to work with you. And the lenses that I did that through there was really focusing on marriage equality. Beauty comes in all shapes and sizes, and talking about the fact that beauty, in the way that I saw it, wasn't being readily centered in the beauty industry. So whether that was someone not getting married at 22, someone that was in a mixed marriage in any way, shape, or form, whether that was race, whether that was, you've been married more than once and one person has not, religion. Again, someone that's in a same-sex union, being that now is legally, you can be married. And so really just focusing on the fact that you did not have to be this prescriptive version of a bride. And so when I started getting into the coaching space, for me, it really became more and more obvious that just life coaching, it's as itself wasn't enough, and that it really had been something that I was passionate about, to support people in stepping into their beliefs, ethics, and values, and that diversity, equity, and inclusion were ways to really begin to address the disparities and the lack of equity and how we can change that. And so supporting business owners in really working on what it looks like in their business. Like, what are your beliefs, ethics, and values? What are they for your business? Where do they intersect? And how are you contributing to changing the landscape? How are you creating a more equitable environment for business owners of color to be able to be visible? How is it that you are supporting entrepreneurs that don't look like you to create more wealth and to make a break in that lack of generational wealth? So it really made sense to do that. And of course, with everything that happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Nina Pop, Ahmaud Arbery, none of these things are new, but I feel like it was kind of the perfect storm of we have this weird orange dude over in the White House that does not stand for people, on an equal footing. And then coronavirus, and then economic woes. And like, it just felt like any and everything that kind of could have converged kind of did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that everything that's happening right now with all of the protesting and all of the just demand for things to change is just like, people are just like, I can't be quiet anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes, the people that are just like, I am going to actively protest, or I have to do my own anti-racist work, or I have to donate to these, whatever the thing is, there is just a lack of willingness to be quiet anymore and to be inactive. And so it's something that I'm glad for. And I hope that it's not okay, I did it, right? I
Yeah.
threw some money at it and I'm done now. Am I good? That was a very long intro.
No, I appreciated all of it. And it led me to a question that I didn't have on my list, but now I'm really curious about. You said in your business, you really started your hair and beauty brand taking a stand that you really cared about, people marrying in ways that are not being shown in the mainstream media. Can
Correct.
you tell me how you decided that that was going to be a stand you took, and kind of how that played out in your business, for better or worse?
So it was something that was always there as far as what I stood for and what I did. So servicing same-sex couples, again, servicing brides that were not stereotypical had been a thing for me. I mean, I've been a hairstylist for well over 20 years, and I've had my beauty business for about 12 years now. And so it was something that I was doing, but yet I felt like, okay, this doesn't need to be something that only I know, or only
That's what I was about
someone
to
that
say.
knows me knows.
Yeah. Did you kind of reach a point where you had to be a little more public or a little more visible about it?
Yes. Oh, and let me also acknowledge that when I first started my business, like, Instagram was not a thing. So there was not this like, go online and here's my parking space and here's all my billboards. Like,
Right.
that was not a thing. So it wasn't as much of a thought process for me of like, how are people going to process me that don't meet me? Because a lot of it came from people that did know me. Most of my
Mm-hmm.
business came from referrals. And
Right.
so it was more clear what I stood for and what my brand stood for. And so then when it became like, social media kind of became a thing, and it's like, okay, so it's not just, Wedding Wire or The Knot or any of these wedding sites. Like, this is an actual platform. And so when I went through a rebrand, I really had to get clear on what was going to go into that. And I did not want to put time and effort and energy into building something that did not bake in what mattered to me and the types of things that were a part of how I hired people. And just I went through and just, like, I made sure that all the language was inclusive in
Mm-hmm.
contracts and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, I have to go all the way. And it was there, but it needed to be fully out front, loud and proud with everything. And I remember writing a blog post about, what we were doing and why it was important. And I literally was like, and if you don't like it, you can kick rocks. Because I literally felt
See you
like,
later. Yeah.
I don't want you here if you don't believe in this,
Mm-hmm.
because I did not feel the need to take the money of people that did not believe in that level of equality, when it came to like weddings, in the sense this is supposed to be a happy day.
Mm-hmm.
And I had clients that would come to me and had not been greeted warmly and did have some less than stellar experiences when it came to customer service and how they were treated and just feeling disrespected. And so it was important to speak up explicitly for same-sex couples, for brides that it wasn't their first wedding, that they weren't getting married young. They, it didn't matter what your size was, and really beginning to encourage these women, and some men to actually say, like, I'm going to embrace what I love about myself, versus coming in and starting with, oh, I have these bags under my eyes, and really leading with what they didn't love about themselves. And so that space of inviting someone to bring their whole self and let's highlight what you do love, considering that life was not highlighting that and
Mm-hmm.
was not set up to encourage you to love yourself, it was extremely important to take something that could seem very, surface deep and to take it further than that.
I love all of that. Thank you for sharing that, Erica.
Of course.
And what was the process that you went through in that rebrand? Was it not just the writing? Was it images? Was it just, I mean, literally, it sounds like every part of your business was kind of affected by that.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was the imagery, it was the, the branding, the colors, the logo, it was copy, it was website, it was everything. And so I, I had to make sure that everything said that this is a part of it. I had to make it clear that this is what you're going to get. Also, because, if I'm sending a stylist out to do something, I wouldn't want someone to kind of walk into a situation that was uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because people weren't clear about what we stood for. And I mean, unfortunately, I've had some situations where people have said some things where I'm just like, did you just say that out loud? And usually what happens is everyone else in the room is like, what the hell? Like they just kind of are looking like, you did not. And very clearly like, I don't agree with that. Please
Yeah.
don't. And I'm like, I guess I get it, you
Yeah.
know. And so it also helped to make it so that as the consumer, they knew what they were buying into.
Right. Right. Thank you for all of that. So as we're thinking about June 2020, where we are sitting now, for a business who maybe, like you said, has had personal beliefs that we're not really living them through their business, and I would count myself in that group. And
Mhm.
P.S., I've scheduled a call with Erica to talk about more than just this. So this is not me having a free coaching call. But on a broad level,
Mhm.
what are some ways that people can start thinking about, letting their audience explicitly know where they stand on some of, racism, diversity, on some of the things that maybe they've valued, but kind of have kept secret or kind of behind the scenes?
Before they can share it with anyone else, they have to get clear on it for themselves. And so you have to start by identifying for yourself, kind of like, what are your personal values and what are those of your business and your brand? And being able to kind of see where their intersection is,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't share something that you yourself don't understand. And I think it's important to dig into the why. Like, so if you say, well, and diversity is important, okay, what does that mean?
I knew
Why?
you were going to say that, and I was thinking about it last night as I was falling asleep.
And it's
What is my why? It is because it is. It's
yes.
something a lot of us have not really taken the time to think about.
And so I think right now there can be this place of people, and sadly, there have been some people that have been putting stuff out and there is no intentionality behind it and it's creating harm.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do want to really explore, why am I doing this? Why does this matter? Why am I stepping into this type of visibility? What's the goal? Who does this
Yeah.
support? How am I facilitating these things? What work do I need to do? And understanding that it's a continuous thing. Because the biggest thing that I have to kind of remind people of is that this is not a one and done. This is not a, okay, I'm going to do coaching with you for 3 months or 6 months and now I'm fine, right? Or you're going to come in and do a workshop and we're good,
I've got a
right?
gold star
Or
now, right? Yeah.
exactly, that's performative. We're not doing that. And so like my business partner India Jackson and I, like, we have a community. It's called Pause on the Play.
I was
And
about to say, P.S. If you have not listened to their podcast, it is a good one.
and that's the thing, like, we have these open, honest, and authentic conversations. And so it has turned into an entire community with this. And so, people come in and we are having these conversations and there are things that they want to work on, but it's understood that, like, doing it in a vacuum is not helpful, where I'm only kind of talking to myself and I have no point of reference. And I'm like, there's no one around me that is doing it as well, that understands. Um, that's not helpful. And, it's really there to be able to remind people that this is about community, because this is not I'm going to go off in my little hovel and work to be anti-racist. And then I'm going to come out like Diana Ross and introduce myself to the world. Please don't do these things. So it is important to be able to do this in a way that you can actually get support and be able to actually ask questions and have conversations. Because like, if you're in any type of course, university, college, anything, and you are taking in information, if there's no test, if there's no some type of something that goes along with it to put it in action, what's the purpose?
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. Something I was on a call with a local nonprofit that I'm on the board of today, and we were kind of talking about what are our next steps as an organization. And it is, a group of white ladies trying to figure out how we can be supportive and diverse and inclusive and
Yeah.
equitable. Um, and several of the people spoke up and said, I have been afraid of saying the wrong thing. And so I just haven't said anything. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
how a lot of people have felt. And I think some of the missteps that we've seen in the last week or two have maybe been because people are speaking out too quickly without doing that pre-thought work that you were talking about, or not
Yes.
having sounding boards to say, what do you think about this? Or how do you think this will land?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on that, of that balance of like being afraid to do it wrong versus just, starting to take baby steps?
The reality is that at some point you're going to get something wrong. There's no way around that. I cannot think of anything in my life that I could say, I did that and I did every piece of it right. Like, that's
It
not a
was
life
perfect.
thing. Right. And so to step into this expecting that comes from a perfectionist place that comes from privilege and also has its own racist roots to it, and that everyone doesn't have that luxury
Mhm.
to consider that and to consider, I don't know that I can speak out for Black people because I don't want to get it wrong. Like, if you hear that statement, it's like, that doesn't sound good. So let's
Right.
not do that. And
Yeah.
so, no, perfection is not even a thing. And that's it. It's a statement I hear often. And so, part of what comes with that statement to me is that when you are surrounded by people that look like you, there's no challenge.
Hmm.
And you're afraid to be the one to rock the boat. And so, part of it is looking at your kind of circle of influence almost, and seeing that there's a lack of diversity, not just in what people look like, but in thought and action and concepts and what people are willing to actually talk about and to do. So you're not going to go anywhere when it comes to that. But I also think that there is this place of, this is where it gets performative and this is where you mess up, and it comes in and you say anything along the lines of, I'm sorry that you misunderstood me. Oh, you mistook what I said, or that wasn't my intention, and insert all the reasons here why I'm a good white woman. That is not going to win you any brownie points, and all it does is point to the fact that you have more work to do than what you thought you did. And it is showing. You are showing your privilege, you are showing your racism, and there's a lot of things that need to be done, but there's also, more than anything else, a lot of undoing. There's a lot of unlearning, there's a lot of deprogramming that has to happen. And so while much of it is about getting some context around what is not only the norm for people today, but also what has historically been the influence that has gotten us to where we are.
Hmm.
And there are things that are going to inform that. And so when you step into it, again, when you're just doing it by yourself, you're afraid to mess it up, you're afraid to say anything, or you talk and there's no purpose to what's being said. And there's kind of, again, that lack of intentionality in just kind of watching someone be very self-serving
Hmm.
about speaking up about what they're doing and why.
Look at me, look at
Please,
me, look at me. Yeah.
right. Please don't come for me. I'm doing the right thing. See? And begs to, the example of what India and I have talked about a lot over the past week, in that there's like this official white woman's handbook of captions to put on social media of like, see, look, this is what I did and I'm good. And it's like, that is why you need to do your work. That is an example of where you aren't supposed to be forward facing with it. I think it's important to stand in your values forward facing so that people know what you do and don't stand for. But when you have to do the performative, check the block, false outrage, that is not helpful. That is harmful. And that is really just an example of what you do because you feel like this is what you're supposed to do, because you got on the bandwagon of the thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
as if, trauma is an accessory.
Yeah. I had a question here, and it wasn't even really a question, but just kind of optics versus actions.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it has felt for the past 2 weeks like if you weren't saying anything, then that was a statement in and of itself.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, finding that right balance and figuring out what the right first step is. And like you said,
Yes.
it sounds like finding a community, finding a place where you can work through this before you're talking about it. And maybe the only thing you need
Yes.
to say is, hey, I'm working on this.
Well, because there is a point that you have to, I do think that it is important to acknowledge what is an unconscionable. My tongue is like, yeah, we've
I'm sorry.
talked
It's
enough
the
for
end of the
today.
day.
What is an unconscionable act for an entire group of people to have to shoulder and endure and experience? And that colors their entire way of being in their life on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis. And being able to just acknowledge that and being able to say, I'm going to do my work, and I don't have anything of value to say right now as I work on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to, highlight other voices, which is what I really implored people to do last week versus just the going mute thing. I'm like, yeah, let's not do that, which is why I had that IGTV video that just went berserk, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, please don't go mute. Let's
Yeah.
not do this. And here's why. Um, but I do think that you do have to have that place of beginning to do your own work, because there's a space in the very beginning in which case you can do a lot of harm, because you do ask too many questions of the wrong people without understanding. And so that's when it's just like, I don't know what I
Your one black friend gets all the texts.
oh, please stop doing that. Please stop putting the weight of an entire group to be um broken down and explained by one person. Like, that is, and if you talk about my black friend, I have one. Oh, and I talk to a black, okay, then that means that your frame of reference is way too small, and that is just a problem in itself. But when that happens, this is where I think that there is some time that you need to give yourself to begin to do some things on your own. And for me, I hold space for people to be able to kind of get some context around things. But you can read books on your own. You can read articles on your own. You can watch movies on your own. I can give you things to do. I
Mm-hmm.
can point you in the direction. I mean, there are a laundry list of people out here like Brittany Packnett Cunningham, who gives amazing information and resources. So that's not
Start
what you
there. Yeah.
need. Correct. Right. And you don't, like, if you're just looking to absorb content, that's a distraction. That's avoidance. Like, that's not helpful. And so I don't think that that's the thing. I think that's like, okay, I'm doing this and I want to be able to be supported as a human, because for me, I think that there is this place of, you have anti-racist work to do, because the world that we live in does not support people openly, honestly, and authentically um, that are not white on a consistent basis. It just does not happen. And so I think there's a space for that, but there's also the space to acknowledge, and this is not something to hide behind. So hopefully no one listening kind of weaponizes the statement, but it's the fact that if you, as a white person, specifically in this example, a white woman says, I am going to step into doing my anti-racist work and no longer rest comfortably in my white privilege, that is a risk. You are now standing with people that don't look like you. You are risking losing business. You are risking losing friends. You are risking losing family members that don't agree with you. You are possibly going to create divides between people that are like, I don't even know you anymore. And it's just like, I don't know you and I don't think I want to.
Right.
And it's important to acknowledge what you gain and what you lose.
Mm-hmm.
It's necessary to do this work, and I think that it is negligent to not acknowledge that this is going to happen, and that you are a whole person, and that in you putting yourself, so to speak, in front of the bullet, kind of being that front line of a protest and saying, as a white person, I am going to shield you because I know what will happen if it's you. And there's likely less of a chance that I would receive as much harm as you. And so stepping into that place is not easy. And so that's where your mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being comes up, for debate if you are not careful and you are not diligent about making sure that that is being addressed.
Can you talk about, since we've just talked about some of the risks, can you talk about some of the upsides that you've seen for businesses who do this work? And not that it's all flowers and rainbows, but
no. Being in integrity.
Nobody does anything if there's no upside.
Correct.
Yeah.
And being in integrity to me
Yeah.
is the first and one of the biggest ones, because if you are aware of what it feels like to be out of integrity, you know what that feels like. And so there's a point to where you can't unsee certain things. And so your lack of being willing to address it can have you in a place of feeling out of integrity, out of alignment. And there's a certain pull when it comes to that can kind of wear you down at best.
It eats at you. Yeah.
It does. And so there's this space of like, I know that I'm doing the right thing. I know I'm doing the necessary thing. And that's rarely the easy thing, but it's necessary. And so I think that there is the fact that, first of all, like as an individual, it does help with your own personal feelings of, making a conscious choice to be a better human being. Then there's a space of how in your business you can feel as though you can utilize that business and that platform to actually help to create equity, to create a space that equity is possible, to set an example for those around you. If you are a parent, setting an example for them, setting an example if there are other children that you are influencing, allowing you to see how you can actually make change happen and how it is possible to actually have an impact on things in a positive way that goes beyond just writing a check and donating it, and being able to actually create and to foster a business that is knowledgeable about its image, who it serves, how it serves them, and doing it from a place of my normal may not be yours. And I am actively working on that, have done so, and will continue to do so. And I want to know more about what has informed your current stance in life and how I can support you there with what it is that I do. Because I see a lot of business owners that really do want to do better with that. And a big chunk of that is being able to acknowledge how to better serve people that don't look like you and to minimize harm, eliminate wherever possible, when that interaction is happening, and not just, oh, I just want diversity because I want the black and brown dollar to line my pockets. More about, no, I want to be able to reach people that need me, that maybe don't know that I'm there. And I want them to know that they are safe here, that they are taken into consideration with all of the things that make them who they are. And, this is just one of the laundry list of things that have come up already that talk about the fact that this is not overnight work.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of, again, reestablishing and deprogramming to be able to do these things in a better way and to understand that this is not about an endpoint. This is a journey.
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought up, because I work with a lot of coaches. And what we have seen, I think, in the online space is a lot of people who either run large communities or, they are coaching people, and that some of the strategies that they have been employing have been harmful and have been, if not tone deaf, definitely, not appropriate for all people. That there's not a one size fits all approach for a lot of this work, that especially self-development kind of work, helping people work through their history and that kind of stuff. So I would love to hear you speak a little bit about intentionally creating diverse communities in the online space. And like you said, making sure that you are making them safe for the diverse people whose dollars you're accepting.
Right. I think it's a big thing. And I think there's a number of nuances that really depend on what it is you do, and particularly some of these specific intersections that you are servicing. So for example, there's a young lady I know that does therapy for trans individuals. And so what would inform how I would serve her is going to be different than somebody that is like, I do marketing strategies
Right.
for, women that have children or so, you know what I mean? So it's not a one size fits all. And that's where this work can sometimes be tough, because I feel like people are like, okay, so what's the strategy?
What's the
What's the
one
formula?
thing?
It's like,
Right.
nope, there is no framework. I am not going
Yeah.
to send you
Yeah.
into this like DIY course without like, you know what I mean? Like you can't come and throw $400 at this course and now you're fine. Goodbye. You are now
Oh,
checked off
I
as
saw someone
anti-racist.
post, don't DIY your DEI. Have you seen that
Yes.
flying around? And I thought that was
Yes.
great. I was like, yes, we need help here.
And so that's where it's just like, no, you need to be able to actually consider who is it that you want to support. And that's that whole, level of intentionality around your values. And so you can't kind of step into this and it's just like, yeah, I just want to help everybody. It's like, what? No. Like, I think if any business owner understands that concept of like, I know that I want to help people that want to have this kind of business. This is the kind of money they want to make. These are the So if you would understand that there, why would all of a sudden when it becomes race, it's like, no, everybody. And it's like, but everybody doesn't want or need this. So no. And so part of it is really based in you doing your own work, because you can't lead a team or be a leader within an organization and to have people that you service and you're not doing your own work, because that's going to inform how you show up, how you speak, how you service them, how you respond to them. So if you don't have your own work in the pipeline as a continuous thing, you are going to have blind spots. You are going to say things that are problematic. So this is where it's not good to like, a lot of what I do is for businesses, but the thing about it is that part of the reason I do that is because for most people, it's easier to say, oh yeah, I'm going to work on my business. They have a harder time being like, oh, I need to do my anti-racist work. They have a harder time swallowing that. But the reality is when you get in it, it's like, oh, this is not just my business. This starts with me, and it absolutely does. And so you have to start with you, and then it begins to inform everything else that's happening. But part of the work that you're doing on you is also being able to be really clear on what those values are and how that informs those that you want to serve, what your business stands for, how it's actually executing those values. What does it look like in action? And being willing to tweak as necessary. Because I think that there's a point right now as we speak where people are like, yeah, I knew what my values was. And now it's like, but does everyone else know?
Right.
Are the people that are looking to work with you, are they clear on this?
And is your team clear on it?
Correct. And so that's where there's this disconnect of like, yeah, I do this, but then the people that work with me have no idea what that clearly is,
Right.
which is going to impact the people that you attract. And that all it does is create misalignment. And so you had people last week that were centering all these Black voices. And it's like, okay, so now what? If this is something that you are realizing you need to step into in a more cohesive way when it comes to your business, and for you to step into your own work with this, what does that look like in your marketing? What does that look like in your messaging? What does your company culture need to do to reflect that? What shifts need to be made? What types of conversations do you need to have with the people that you work with in order to reflect this? And this is where it needs to be acknowledged that team, and this is where I think from the legal point, you can step in on this one. She's like, well, yes. Team is bigger than just the people you employ. Team is who you are actually paying on payroll. Team are the VAs that you're employing. Team are the people that you work with on a project basis. It's your project designer. It's your copywriter. It is your coach. It is all of these people that are contributing to the collective whole. You need to be able to understand that that collective whole should be unified in some way, shape, or form. And if that unifying factor is you need to check all those spokes and make sure that that wheel is working. Because if it's not, it's likely that you are what's broken.
Yeah. Well,
not broken as a person,
saw,
but
yeah,
like, you know what I mean?
And when I saw a lot of the missteps, and I'm curious for your input on this as well, what I saw was a real kind of lack of leadership of a lot of these people who run very large companies basically saying, I don't read the news. I don't. I have boundaries. I don't come on social media on the weekends. And I just thought,
Mm.
what anybody can have their own rules. That's fine.
Yeah, but there is also a point that I think
Like
any
when we're
business
in
owner knows.
crisis, you show up. Or
Yes,
when the world is
yes.
on fire, like you turn on the news.
That's like being a mom and being like, it's 11:30. I know
You
you're
have a
sick, but I
blowout.
can't
I'm
help
sorry. Yeah,
you.
I know. Erica
Not
and I
my
have children who are
problem.
similar ages. So
Yes, it's like, sorry, you're just gonna have to figure that out in the
yeah,
morning.
I know. You had a nightmare. So sorry. Yeah, go back to sleep.
Right.
No, and I also thought, and it showed me also, okay, these are people with very, for the online space, very large businesses, 10 million, 20 million annual revenue.
Correct. Correct.
And for some of the comments that I saw coming out from teams and from the leaders, it made me think, okay, either you're super tone deaf, which is possible, or you have not one person around you who has the courage or the permission to speak to you and tell you what you're doing is wrong.
The
Because
courage and the
if
permission.
everyone around you is just saying, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no problem.
Yes.
It
That
just,
is
and it made me think, like, am I surrounding myself with yes people, or am I surrounding myself with people who would say, like, yeah, I want to rethink
Mhm.
that.
But that's where I think it's so important when we talk about that entire concept of having a seat at the table. That seat does nothing if you can't have a voice, and if that voice is not actually playing an active part in
Mm-hmm.
the decision making process and what the outcomes are.
Yeah.
And so, part of it is telling me that there is nobody that is telling you, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Like from a business standpoint, and even from
Or like
like a
nobody
friend
has your cell phone number
standpoint.
to be like, hey, you need to get in here. Like
Right.
you're
Because
going to need it.
honestly,
Yeah. I don't
I
care
have
if you're at the spa.
friends.
Like, yeah.
Right. Like I have friends that would be like, what did you do?
Yes.
Like, I'm like, there's nobody
There's not
that
one
was
I
going
know.
to
Say it
speak
for
up.
like 5 days. Yeah.
I'm like, no. And so this avoidance, this lack of wanting to address things, this erasure, let me take down the post, let me turn off the
Let
comments,
me
let me
pretend
just
it didn't happen. Right.
people have the receipts. I hate to tell you, but they screenshotted it and they shared it and they're going to like blow up your spot, so to speak. Like it's just not going to happen because you can't assume that in the day and age of social media that you can do and say these kinds of things and then you think, oh, I deleted it so it doesn't exist. Yeah, that's not a thing.
Mm-mm.
And number two, why are you erasing emotional labor and the proof that there's work to be done? That in itself proves that you have anti-racist work to do because your actions are fully racist.
Yeah.
They are not helpful. And this is where again it's like, who makes up your team that nobody can say anything, they don't feel empowered to, or that even if they do, you're not going to do anything any
Right.
differently. And so if your values don't run, and this is a clear example of where your values, you're showing what they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And so as much as you'll come back and say that you foster diversity and you believe in this, no, you don't, because you showed me that you didn't. So I don't care what else you come in here with. After the fact, you can come in and have whatever lip service that you want. Your actions proved how you really felt. They proved it.
Yeah. Talk to me. I took a workshop on Monday. She did it on Sunday. That you probably saw. Trudy LeBaron did a workshop for white coaches, which I so
Mm-hmm.
appreciated. And one thing she talked about that I had never thought about before was if you are leading these spaces, if you have a community that is large and diverse, that you really should have a proactive plan on the front end of how to deal. Like these things are going to come up. There's going to be tense moment. There's going to be conversations that that get out of control.
Yep.
And that you need to, if you want to hold space for these conversations, you don't have to, but if you want to, you
Mm-hmm.
should have a proactive plan kind of on the front end for what to do. So do you have any thoughts on that of maybe it is just doing your own work and surrounding yourself with people. But I thought that was really
Yeah.
interesting that you should be thinking kind of 10 steps ahead. This should not be reactive. This should be proactive.
Trudy is 150% correct. And Trudy did a lot of emotional labor
Whew. I know. I was like,
with
man, this happened
everything.
yesterday. You put this
Yes.
together.
I mean, she's 100% right. And it's a great example of where I feel like people will make contingency plans for everything except for things like this. Now, we're all at a place that we understand that we need to have certain contingency plans for pandemics, because apparently this is now a thing.
I'm now
So we
putting it in
get
all my contracts, as you might imagine.
well, and that's actually honest and necessary to reflect, because I remember when Freddie Gray was murdered by the police officers here, and this was, I think, 2015, 2016, when the riots happened in Baltimore. And I had to have my wedding contracts changed to reflect that if we can't get there
Yeah.
because of civil unrest, that we are not held responsible for it. And it basically said act of God or not act of God.
Yeah.
You know, so we had to specifically do that. And so if we have contingency plans for things like this, why are we not having contingency plans for something that is very likely to happen?
Very foreseeable.
Right. It's more likely that this is going to come up than a tornado or a hurricane or a pandemic. Like, these are things that are likely to happen. And what do you do? And so it needs to be planned for. You know, number one, do not erase the emotional labor. Don't go in here erasing stuff. That is a harmful racist action. That is a terrible thing to do. And you have to begin to actually go through and look at, like, okay, what is our stance on this? How do we respond to this? Who do we tap on when this happens? What does this look like, you know, in this community, in this, you know, this audience that we've built? Talking with them about when these kinds of things happen. Do you want to have this dialogue? Do you feel comfortable having it in this capacity? Do you feel comfortable with having it with certain members of the team instead of others? Because that's come up as well in people that I know that work in the government did not feel comfortable having the conversation about George Floyd with superiors that were white.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think also addressing who am I speaking to is necessary. But you do need to go through and see, as a company, as a brand, what does this look like? If this happens, now what? The if this, then that. What do we do? What is the, can I curse?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll put an explicit on it.
What is the oh shit button that you hit? Yeah. Because you do need to know,
and think about which button, like which lever do you need to pull at that point?
Right. And so it also talks about the fact that you need to address that this is something that you want to address. Mm-hmm. Because when you're caught off guard and it's like, oh, I think that is when people get under duress and the actions get extremely questionable at best. And so a lot of what we had seen happen last week came from people being, either you just didn't care. So I'm going to say some people just didn't care, period. And they legitimately thought they were doing the right thing, and it was not the right thing. But for some people, under duress, they were like, and they didn't know what to do, and they panicked. And then before they realized it, it was like, oh no, I said that out loud. Oh, shit, now what? And so it became this whole point of panic and a lot of unnecessary correction that maybe didn't have to happen, because now you got to fix the problem. Right. That should not have been a problem. I mean, it's whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But if you can minimize it as much as possible, it's just like any other part of your business that you build in a system in case of emergency.
That's so smart. Thank you for walking us through that.
Sure.
I could talk about this all day with you. It's funny.
Well, and I'm glad you brought it up, though, because I think that it's the kind of thing that people don't think about. And if you can, and I'm not going to systematize this work in a way that it's like, it's to make it simple and just do this. But I do think
a 3-step process for.
Exactly. But if you can at least break it down in a way that your brain can process it, it might make it easier for you to be able to take in that information, make it actionable, and actually move forward with it. Because it's no good to just get information. Like, you actually want to take it and it's like, okay, I see what I can do with this. I see where I can actually make this a part of our company culture. I see where this can be something that we discuss with clients in the very beginning. If you do copywriting, you know, if this were to happen, how would you want me to handle this for you? Do you want to have a statement put out? Who would you want a specific person to write that for you? Like what? And that's again going back to values. Like, what are your values on this? Because I had some people that were like, this happened, and we don't really have a quote unquote protocol for this. And so it's addressing, like, when this comes up, how does this intersect with your business and the people that you work with and the people that you serve? And how can you get in front of this and to be more prepared? And what work do you need to do to be able to do it by minimizing harm?
Yeah. One thing I've been thinking about a lot and seeing, especially over the past week, with people making mistakes, getting criticized, reaction, defensiveness, all of this, how helpful do you find it? Kind of what I've seen, a lot of calling out. And I know that I come at this with a lot of white privilege, and a lot of like, I want everyone to like me. I'm also an Enneagram 3. So I don't like conflict. And so, kind of raised to not ripple the water, not rock the boat. And so I have been, like, frankly, a little uncomfortable seeing a lot of the calling out. But I've seen kind of both. I've seen a lot of different opinions about it. Like, yes, this is helpful. No, this is not helpful. So I'm just curious, and I understand it. There's no right answer here. I'm just curious your opinion on some of that, or if there is a way to do it that is productive rather than. I'll give you one example that might be helpful. So I saw a woman who I don't know, who's apparently a coach, had been running ads with mostly white images. She's a white woman. And then all of a sudden, like last week, up pops an image of a Black woman in one of her ads. And so another person called her out for that.
Yes.
And it was pretty brutal. And she responded, "Oh my gosh, I use an agency. I had no idea they were doing that. I'm going to fix it." But it kind of continued. And so it was interesting to watch. I was a bystander to all of that. So that's just kind of one of many examples.
So the interesting thing is what you said is one of the things that Indy and I talked about in the community, in that if you have anything that is running on like schedules, pause it. Don't let anything run automatically, because you don't know what's going out, and you now have to go do damage control. And so whenever things like this happen, again, that's what I think should be a part of that plan of, like, if something like this happens and you have to hit that panic button, part of that needs to be all scheduled, anything, posts, podcasts, blog posts, social media, stop. Everything stops. Nothing should be automatic at that point, because that is going to put you in that place of that could happen. And that's where there needs to be that conversation with who's working with you as a part of your team.
Yeah. Which includes your agency. Yeah.
Correct. And I say that because I use Flaunt Your Fire to support me with my marketing efforts. And it was very clear, like, oh, no. Everything comes to a halt. There is no automatic. And so part of it is that. But then what happens when it comes out is you have like the kind of the call out or call up kind of thing that can come up. And so I think there's a space to acknowledge things in hopes that people will acknowledge it. And I think there's a place where you just call it out because it is what it is. And the challenge of any of it is that specifically Black people are already considered to be loud and argumentative or angry. And so the minute anything is said, it's immediately felt to be amplified in not a positive way in comparison to if a white woman said it. And so there's this place of, how nice am I supposed to be to tell you that you did something that was racist? And it's very, very reflective of what's happening with the protest. It's like, how do you protest injustice politely?
Right.
That's not a thing. And so I do think that, and again, last week, it was just like enough. And so any possibility that there could be more dialogue around things might have been gone just because of just, I can't anymore.
Right.
And so what I try to remind people of is, again, how nicely are people supposed to say, please stop kicking me?
Right. Right.
How nicely is it supposed to be, I can't breathe, please stop choking me? Like, there is just a point to where however it comes out is how it comes out, because you don't know what contributed to where that person was in that moment, what else they had endured, what else they had to hold space for, how else they're feeling, just where they are in their life and how tired they are. And
Mm-hmm.
so it can be very easy to point out how someone called attention to what you did. But if the focus is on the way that the attention was called to it and
Mm-hmm.
not the injustice at its core,
Right.
that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think that there was any reason whatsoever um, that anyone should have been held to a standard of, why did you say that way last week? I mean, as a
Mm-hmm.
general statement, I don't think that anybody needs to be tone policing anyone anyway, as a general statement. But like, there's absolutely no space that should have happened last week, like that, because there was a lot of centering, and there was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like, I can't believe that you felt that way about what I said. And it's like, okay, no, 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 no. And so, that's where that place needs to happen of, I apologize, this was wrong, I can see that this impacted you greatly, and it's not okay. I will do my own work to figure out why this landed this way and what it is that I didn't do properly, um and I will do better. And again, and not just the I from a place of, let me center me, but the I in the sense of, I am not going to put on you to tell me what I did wrong and how I need to do it right the next time. I'm going to take my own responsibility for fixing that and for moving forward in a better way. Um, and I'm going to own, my transgression and where I was hurtful. I was wrong. And I let my, white supremacist actions, consciously or subconsciously, cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
Cause harm.
See, thank you for that. You mentioned before we hit record, thinking about kind of what comes next. And you kind of alluded to
Mm-hmm.
that, we've hopefully anything that was pre-scheduled got paused. And now we're kind of thinking through, okay, it's a new week. What happens next? If I had a launch plan, do I launch? If I've
Yes.
got things going on, do I turn them back on?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how can I, or do we just kind of scrap everything and rethink, what's appropriate?
I think it really depends on how you look at it. So I'm going to say that I do think that business owners as a whole do need to still sell, um, because you are no good to yourself, the movement, or anyone else if you cannot, care for yourself and your family and take care of your responsibilities. However, I think that everything did change last week. And so it really is time to reevaluate what moving forward looks like. What is the norm? What is it that what you stand for and how that's baked into what you do, making it clear to people what it is that you do stand for, what you stand against, what is going to be a normal part of what your messaging looks like, the types of people that you're going to center. So beginning to kind of step back and to do that reevaluation of what your plan is and how you are going to take your efforts to support Black bodies and Black business owners and Black artists and just this entire group of people that, like, including myself, that doesn't have the privilege of the same level of visibility consistently. What does that look like to say, I want to shift that? And again, really making sure that it's a part of your marketing, your messaging, company culture, the conversations that are being had, contingency plans. So it's a little bit of an overhaul, an eval of like, what is this going forward? So I don't think that launching or anything like that goes on permanent hold, but I think you want to make sure that you really look at what you're doing as to whether or not it's still in alignment anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because it likely is not fully in alignment as it stands.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be. If it is, it's like, okay, so you
Did you
weren't
have a
doing this
crystal ball?
right. Like you weren't doing this before and you just started. And no, like if you were doing it before and now it's like, now I want to do more, even then you still want to make sure that that level of shift is apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you want to be able to clearly understand what is next, what does this look like, what's the goal, what's the why, what's the point, who does this actually support, what's the execution of it. And that's important not only for you to know how to do it, but when people come and ask you, you need to know. If you're going to hire somebody, if somebody does say something online and you're like, I want to be able to share with you what this is, and you need to have that clarity, period. That needs to be there. So I think that you still need to launch, you still need to sell, but I think that it is time to pause, to really step into being open, honest, and authentic and forward facing about those values, and then go forth.
Well, thank you, Erica. I think that's a good place to wrap up. I really appreciate you giving me so much time. We've gone long, which I have really enjoyed. Tell all the listeners where they can find you, learn more about you, find your podcast, all the things.
So again, I am Erica Corday. Website is ericacorday.com. That is where you can learn more about me, my coaching services, and the DEI work that I do. You can go ahead and shoot an email over and we can go ahead and begin to have the conversation of what it looks like if your business needs support. I also have a podcast, so you can go ahead and make no excuses as to why you cannot begin your journey today. You can listen to that free content. That is Pause on the Play, and that is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, all the places.
All the things.
Exactly. And that is pauseontheplay.com. Social media is the same for both. It's Erica Corday and it is Pause on the Play. And through Pause on the Play, you'll also be able to learn a little bit more about like the 2-in-1 services that we do that is going to combine to DEI with your marketing and your messaging and about the community.
Fantastic. And I always like to ask, but we're in such a weird time. What are you looking forward to? What's coming up that is exciting for you, Erica?
I am looking forward to continuing to actually begin the work. I've had so many calls with people, and the beauty of it is that people are really stepping into it. And so seeing where I can impact change with what I do, seeing how I can actually support people in doing things differently. I am excited for that. I am hopeful that everything that felt like the perfect storm kind of last week, like terrible, granted, I am not glorifying in any way, shape, or form, but just everything at one time, I really do hope that it makes a large and substantial change that doesn't just go away when the smoke kind of clears. I want it to be something that stays and that people are committed to doing things differently.
Yeah, it feels like a tipping point to me. So,
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we'll see. And as you said, I'm not thankful or happy about anything that has led us to this place. But as I'm kind of looking at my own values and ethics and how I'm living them out in my business, I'm glad for the push. I'm glad for
Exactly.
It feels like a door opening a little bit. So
you got it.
Well, thank you, Erica. This was a really, really nice conversation. Not nice. I don't know why I said that. It was a thought-provoking.
It was good dialogue. It really was.
Good dialogue. Yeah. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with our listeners. I hope they all go find you and, continue their learning and their journey.
Thank you, Autumn.
All right. Stop record. And we went long. So if you